All right, guys, so today we're going to be diving into how to choose healthier food options. So a question that I get asked a lot from my clients, from my followers, is what is healthy food? How do I choose healthier foods? When I'm out to eat, how do I choose healthier foods? What is a healthy food? First thing that I'll go into is explaining that healthy foods are always relative. So a healthy food that is healthy for me might not always be healthy for my family, my friends, my boyfriend. People have different allergies, people have different intolerances. Different types of foods might not be healthy for different types of people. For example, a good one would be like dairy. So sometimes with me, dairy never really affects me. I don't get like bad acne from it. I don't get bloating from it, but some people that are more sensitive might get acne. If you're lactose intolerant, dairy might not be healthy for you. Or we could talk about peanut butter. People with nut allergies, peanut butter might be, or almond butter might be healthy or considered healthy. And for somebody with a nut allergy, it's not going to be very healthy. Gluten would be another good example. So some people are more sensitive to gluten, so gluten doesn't react well with them, and you might be able to eat gluten and not notice any ill effects from it. The other thing is healthy also comes in stages. So something that might be healthy for me now might not be a healthy or the right option whenever I'm cutting for a show, or usually it is for a show. That's not a good example. But healthy at different stages of your life would be like if you're recovering from surgery or an illness or some sort of injury. Sometimes a healthier option might be something that has a lot more calories in it for a small amount of volume. If you're sick or recovering from, say, a surgery, then you need more calories, more protein, all of your macronutrients just to recover so that those cells can build back up and build any muscle tissue that was damaged or any other tissues that were damaged. Illnesses help fight that off. You need more calories, so sometimes picking something that's not considered normally good, something like a high calorie drink or just something to get calories in, is going to be way better than not eating something. So that would be considered healthy for you in that instance. So healthy food ranges. There's different scales that I like to use whenever I'm explaining what would be a healthier food option. And whenever I'm thinking of healthy foods, I have two scales that I go by. There is less nutritious and more nutritious. So having more or less micronutrients, more or less macronutrients, and where it falls on that scale. There is no good or bad foods. There's more or less nutritious, and then there's calorie dense and calorie void. So there's going to be a scale of more calories, like having more calories in less volume for food, and then there's foods that have less calories. Did I say that right? More calories, less calories. There's your scale for that. So what I'm trying to say is there are no good or bad foods. There is no moral dilemma when it comes to food. You're not good or bad for eating a food. And I mean, unless like you're being like a cannibal or something, but please don't do that. So with the two scales that we have, with the calorically dense foods, the nutrient dense foods, and then nutrient void and calorie void foods, each food is going to be a little different on each scale. So we'll give a few examples. So like an apple is something that has more nutrients in it. So it's got a lot more micronutrients, and it's going to have a lot less calories per volume. So you'd be able to eat, a small amount of apples, maybe like one apple, and get a lot of nutrients out of it with less calories. You could think of things like vegetables and high fiber options are usually the same. So a peanut butter example again. So peanut butter has a lot of nutrients in it, and for the volume, for like 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, which is usually a serving, you're getting a lot of calories. So it's calorically dense and nutrient dense. Next one would be diet pop. So I like to use this one because it is not very nutritious. There's not that many macros with it, barely any. So it barely has any calories, so it's calorie void. and then it barely has any nutrients, so it's also nutrient void. Water would be another example of that. So no calories, no nutrients. And the next one is table sugar. So table sugar is an example of one that for a small amount you get a lot of calories, but at the same time you're not getting a lot of nutrients. So that is usually where people think junk foods come in, are things that have a lot of calories in them but have barely any nutrients. So that's usually where your junk foods would be. So going back to this volume thing, so volume just means the amount of food that we're talking about. So volume would be like having like the weight and how much it takes up in your stomach is what I think of when I think of volume. So things that are going to take up a lot of room in your stomach, or you don't have to eat as much to fill you up, those are going to be our high volume foods. And foods that are low in volume are foods that you could eat and still feel pretty hungry. So things with a lot of fiber or things that expand in your stomach are going to be a lot more satiating, which just means they make you feel fuller. And those are usually your things, sorry. Those are usually your things that have more volume. With high volume, it doesn't always mean that you're going to be getting a lot of calories out of it. So like lettuce, spinach, you could eat a lot of those things, fill up your stomach, not feel overly bloated from it, and not have that many calories. But you could also eat something that has high fat, and you're going to be getting a lot of calories, but it's usually lower volume. So like an avocado, like you could eat an avocado and still feel pretty hungry. But moving on, why are foods considered good and bad, and why are carbs and sugars usually demonized? Well, sugar is usually demonized because it is one of those things that, like I was saying about the food volume, you can eat a little bit of it, get a lot of calories, but not get a lot of nutrients, and usually don't feel very full. So it's really easy to overeat sugar. It tastes great, usually mixed with like fats. Think of like cookies and things like that, your junk food items, candy bars, everything like that is not going to fill you up a ton. You usually crave it afterwards. Most people do. And that's why they're usually demonized, because they don't fill you up and you can really easily get too many calories eating them. But if you're eating a well-balanced diet, fitting things like that in whenever, especially like after you've eaten a meal, or if you're, if you just want to have it and you're not going to overeat on it, then it's not a bad thing to include those types of things into your diet. It's actually healthier to include those things so that you don't end up binging on it later or stressing out about it, which stressing out about it is just going to lead to other ill effects that we do not want. The topic of good and bad food could go on, and I'm sure I'll do a future video on all types of like why foods are considered good or bad and why people have these like labels with foods and labels with diets. I'll probably do another video on that to explain it further, but right now we'll just go into how to choose healthier options and healthier foods for you to kind of apply what we just talked about. So how do you know what foods are going to be better for you, or if you're counting macros, fit into your macros better? So with foods, they always have a food label unless you're looking at like a raw vegetable or maybe something from like a restaurant, something like that. But the cool thing about having our phones is that we can Google these things. So if you're using MyFitnessPal, you can easily look up the nutrients, the calories, the serving sizes, and anything. You can scan the label. You can look at the food label. Just start turning the grocery store into your library. So every time you find a food, pick it up, look at the back, check out the serving size, the calories, the nutrients, and you can figure out if a food is nutrient dense or nutrient void and where it lands on that scale. And you can figure out if it's calorie dense or calorie void and where it lands on that scale. So that can kind of determine if you're going to be using that food as a food that you want to include into your diet. The first place that I like to start with people is just what you're eating now. Figure out where each of those foods lands on that scale and figure out if there's any way that you can swap something for a more nutritious or less calorie, or maybe sometimes more calorie option, especially for my people that are trying to build muscle, looking into getting more of those calories in without feeling bloated. So that would be a good option for you. So these flexibility and not having food rules kind of leaves us feeling overwhelmed sometimes. So whenever you get that feeling of, overwhelm, that's whenever you can start kind of diving into creating grocery lists, creating meal ideas, recipe ideas, some sort of structure that can help you so that you're not so overwhelmed that you just don't do anything, because that happens. You kind of freeze with the overwhelm. Once I have an idea of what a healthy food is for me, or what kinds of foods I want to include into my own nutrition, then it makes it a lot easier to go on and feel better about myself, feel satiated, so feeling full, not feeling hungry, not feeling overly bloated. And it just comes down to experimenting and figuring out what works for you. It's always a guess and check game. You'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't. It's just time and patience and asking your coach, for some ideas, especially with the grocery shopping. That is a good one, and I'll probably do another video on that as well. But moving forward, I want to know what kinds of foods you guys think are healthy and what kinds of foods you include into your own diet. And whenever I say diet, I just mean what you eat, your nutrition, not like a diet as in dieting, like fad diets. So what do you guys think is healthy? Go ahead and comment below, and maybe you can give somebody else a good idea, or maybe I'll find some inspiration from it as well. So go ahead and comment, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope this helped. If you have any questions, let me know.